Welcome to Digital Marketing Lesson 1, Lecture 1, Digital Marketing in a Digital World. This is our first lesson, and today we will explore the fundamentals of marketing in the digital age, focusing on how the landscape has evolved and the strategies that we use today. In lesson 1, we will cover off on all of the topics here, but for the purposes of this lecture, we're going to really hone in on what is digital marketing and the evolution and environment of digital marketing. These key concepts will include, over the course of the entire lesson, value, digital marketing mix, objectives, and the importance of analytics. So we're all on the same page. We all have an idea of what digital marketing is, but what are we actually defining it as for the purposes of this course? Well, to begin, we're going to turn to the American Marketing Association, who describe it as the use of digital channels to promote brands or reach consumers. Digital marketing is more than just social media. It's a dynamic field that touches every point where businesses and consumers interact online. And for the purposes of this course, we say and talk a lot about business, but think about business being interchangeable with organization, whether you're a nonprofit, NGO, a solopreneur, or B2B or direct-to-consumer business. The principles here should really be applicable. And I'm here to help you adjust any of these concepts if you are actually working towards a specific goal or purpose in taking the certificate program, particularly this course. So please do reach out if you have questions. But let's go to the definition. So marketing is defined as the activity set of institutions and processes for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. Yes, even society at large, hopefully, if we're doing it right. As a subset, digital marketing is the use of digital and or social channels to promote a brand or reach consumers. And again, a consumer can be any end person that we're looking to convince or convert. A brand is a name, term, design, or symbol or other aspect that identifies one's organization, their product, their service, and distinguishes it from that of another. So Nike is one of those we'll cover off in lesson 1. Those distinguished brands that are just known worldwide by a symbol. That's ideally what we're all striving for when it comes to brand. Doesn't always get there, but we ideally want to make it clean and concise so that it can be communicated very efficiently. So the evolution and environment of digital marketing. What am I talking about here? Well, I like to think about marketing not existing in a vacuum. There are all of these forces around us happening. And one of them is the internet. Why is digital marketing sort of the default for marketing these days? Well, the internet. And I love this sub Reddit. How did you discern fact from fiction before the internet? And this is on the Ask Old People subreddit. You can look at the link in my notes, but marketing doesn't exist in a vacuum. Of course, it has to evolve to the things happening around it. And arguably, the internet is the largest thing that's happened. And the internet has become this amazing force that's brought together psychology, sociology, and anthropology in very, very intersectional ways across the discipline of marketing. And it really is exemplified in digital marketing, especially as we move and evolve. And we'll look at that right now. So when we think about the beginning days, it feels like a long time ago, but it actually wasn't that long ago. Most of this happened in my lifetime, which feels insane in a way. Digital marketing has really evolved rapidly. In the 70s and 80s, email marketing was king. And in a lot of ways, email marketing is still king to many. It's very important anyway. Then came Web 1.0 in the 90s with basic website marketing and banner ads. Remember banner ads, how important they were? That was the 90s. And it was the beginning of the 2000s. And through that, we entered Web 2.0. There were Web 2.0 conferences that I covered that I spoke at. And that's where social media and user generated content got everybody so excited. The idea that you could be your own broadcast channel as a human being. But more, I think companies thought we were selling the idea to companies a lot of the time, those of us that were early to this space, in really telling them to command um, you take charge of their brand, be their own channel, and not rely so much on what we call now traditional media sources for getting the word out about their product or service. And that's kind of where content took over. Now we're in what is called Web 4.0, where machine intelligence, machine learning, AI personalizes our interactions. So everything from hands-free in our car using Siri, Alexa in our homes, or Google Assistant, all of those pieces of technology that we may rely on to get around even and consider part of our safety are all part of the artificial intelligence we've come to rely on, or most of us have, in our daily lives. And if you didn't, everybody remembers the recommendation screen from Netflix during the pandemic, or most people do. Um, that was, for many people, the first introduction of really what AI could be, that search recommendation with its body of knowledge about you and your likes, dislikes, your tastes, what you might have watched before, etc. And now we're looking ahead. We expect Web 5.0 to fully immerse us in metaverse-like environments. And I kind of hesitate to say metaverse because it's really not limited to the literal metaverse and Mark Zuckerberg's vision of what that is. We know Apple has a headset out now, and more of us are going to be experiencing those immersive um, those immersive technologies. And it'll be interesting to see how quickly and maybe how more rapidly they become the norm in terms of what digital marketing really becomes or is. So think of Web 5.0 as not just the future, but we're actually in this transitional moment where this is actually something that some of you may apply in real life very soon or now. When we talk about the evolution and environment of digital marketing, there's, of course, the macro environment, and we'll look closer at the micro environment in a moment. But the macro environment is factors such as political, social, technological, environmental, and legal forces, often summarized as PESTEL, and they affect how digital marketing strategies are created and executed. So although we might not like including or factoring in these pieces to our digital marketing strategies, programs, campaigns, they are really important. If you're going to launch a campaign for something that's red, white, and blue, a product, let's say, that happens in a presidential election year, it may be considered politically charged in some way, even though it may have nothing to do with politics at all. But we want to be thinking through each of these factors as marketers and trying to remove ourselves from what our emotions might be, our personal feelings, but actually thinking through what our end users, our target customers might be thinking about and how that might affect them and even their biases. When we go back to that example that I showed from Reddit, how did you find information before the internet? In a way, it's how do we find information now, or accurate information? Because now algorithms serve us information, and they almost always, it's very difficult for algorithms to not know quite a bit about you from either your device, your stored settings, past search history. And even if you're opting out of all of that, if you're using VPNs, if you're using all kinds of security, even then, from person to person, search engine results pages could be influenced by things like location services, which you may not want turned on. But from device to device, they may vary. So if your tablet, for example, isn't using cellular, you don't have it active on that device, and you're using the same kinds of protocols to keep yourself protected and anonymous, you're going to see different results on your phone because your mobile carrier needs to know where you are. And so even if you're on Wi-Fi, it's really interesting to see what the difference is between those different devices and compare and contrast with that with your desktop, that with other users in the same household who may be using similar protocols to try to keep themselves safe. I love nothing more than getting together with other marketers and comparing our search engine results with all of our protective features turned on and our favorite browser that keeps us anonymous. Because we really are looking for information that helps give us the best intelligence around political factors like foreign trade, economic factors like whether or not we are in an inflationary period, social trends that can compel us to be creative because we want to be on trend, and maybe we're working for a company that needs to be seen to be very forward looking and set trends. Technological, if you're in an area that says that you're creating new technology, you really have to provide exceptional services and experiences that go along with that. So if your chatbot lets you down or you don't have good customer service hours, those things can really undercut the consumer expectation. Environmental factors such as digital waste or e-waste is extremely important to factor in. And then, of course, legal. We never want to expose ourselves to anything unlawful when it comes to privacy and cybersecurity, of course. But I do healthcare marketing a lot. And so HIPAA, that becomes another, you know, application of law that does become and originally was a digital measure, but not a lot of people realize that. So in any event, keeping our health, our private health information private is really, really obviously legally very important in the United States when it comes to marketing. But the same might be said for, making sure that an influencer labels an Instagram post #ad. That's a Federal Trade Commission violation if not done, and it can get more complicated than that depending on what it is that they are promoting, if there's alcohol involved, etc. So in any event, thinking through these factors, whether it's yourself on your own or with a team of people, to make sure you're all on the same page with the considerations that you're taking into account now and looking forward to whatever you may be planning for is absolutely crucial. And I always love to do things in collaboration. Not everybody feels that way, but especially as a solopreneur for a long time, I think it's always great to gather collaborative data where possible. And so sometimes using things like Google Trends or other crowdsourced pieces of information and analytics on the web can be helpful to help us understand how people are feeling in a particular market. So going back to healthcare marketing, if I'm working for somebody that has does an expensive but necessary for some procedure. It's a small percentage of the population, but it may be a cash pay procedure that's very expensive. I'm looking to target populations that not only need the service, but can afford to pay cash. If I'm working for a client that only does the procedure for cash, mostly because I don't want to upset people that may have the expectation that they can use insurance. So I'm going to be doing things actively to try to weed out anything that gives that impression. And there's a lot of things that you can think about when you're starting to think about your target market more specifically, what you can do to not keep things from them, of course, but set false expectations, really, because it does damage trust greatly. Now, I talked about the macro environment. Let's look at the micro environment. So the micro environment includes factors the organization has a lot more control over. It's things like strategic planning, supplier relations, competitors, and customer engagement, customer service. These internal and external relationships shape how companies implement their digital strategies, or really how well they implement their digital strategies. So think about, your organization, even if you're a solopreneur, or a one-man band, as they say, or used to say, you still want to have some planning and forethought as to what you hope your organization might look like in the near term or short term medium term, and long term, even if long term is a year from now or 6 months from now. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of time. Um, Suppliers need to be considered versus, things like sourcing things locally. How important is that within a particular community? A lot of people may have a feeling about importing, let's say, textiles when there's lots of dead stock fabrics available and around. And thrifting is something that is been quite popular and made a comeback in recent years among Gen Z. So the other thing you might think about too are intermediaries who are marketing things that are um, either your products and services or that maybe are an add-on or complement your products or services. They could also be people that market to you if you're a B2B business. We also like to think about competitors. That's really important. You want to have that competitive advantage and that unique selling point. But I also think comparative examples are really helpful. I've had a lot of people through the certificate program that have come through wanting to do projects on nonprofit organizations, especially animal welfare, which is fantastic. And um, they have similar competitive information that they can get out of their micro environment. But in a lot of ways, it's easier if I tell them to look at comparative organizations, basically organizations that are trying to get the same kinds of money from the same kinds of donors. And so if you start thinking about, again, those individual populations that you're trying to convince and convert more specifically, looking at not just competitive factors, but comparative organizations or companies may also be a helpful thing or lens for you to think through. Public organizations, individuals, government officials, let's say, anyone who has influence within a community. It can be an actual influencer, but it doesn't have to be. It can be somebody who is a huge stakeholder, has a lot of money in a particular area, and exerts a lot of uh, influence because of that. So imagine there's a lot of mid-sized cities that have, an individual person that may own many restaurants, for example, and people had very strong feelings during the COVID era, and especially as COVID comes back and flares up in different communities. This may come up again in social media where an owner may have taken a particular position on masking, let's say, or business closures. And whether they were right or wrong is objectively not even important as a marketer to consider. I can have my own personal view, but I need to be looking at the microenvironment. How do people in the local community feel about that? And is that something I might need to, if I were working with that owner, need to work with them on? I see this all the time come up in the communities where I do very like local marketing and I'm not in that market. Even if I'm in the market, I always want to be on those Discord channels, or I want to be in the subreddits or whatever those local pieces might be, doing data scrapes and looking at what people are saying about individuals. And it's interesting how much the example of how people behaved amid COVID comes up. And so again, divorcing our sense of what was right or wrong from what is the right thing to do for the organization and how to market it and how to help public perception of it in that market is what you really want to be thinking through. That's that sort of public piece. And I think that example is a good one because it seems to come up a lot. And I think it's a good example of how you can use social media for some of your market research as well. And then, of course, customers. Those customers are the ones that are adding to negative or positive reviews. So you want to be managing relationships with them and doing your reputation, usually in a reputation management program of some kind, thinking through what you can do to get those reviews and also getting those reviews in the way that the particular review site wants you to get them. Some say don't solicit, others want you to solicit those reviews. Some things, like I talked about medical marketing, some things people don't want to do the review because their name may be associated with the review. And if it's very private, really anything medical, they of course always have the ability to, decide whether or not they want to do a review. I mean, it's kind of a pain to create another account with some other name on it, anonymized name, just to provide a review for a provider. We know very few people provide great reviews even when they've had an exceptional experience. So getting someone to go to that extra step becomes even harder. So thinking through, are there ways, are there new tools and technology that can help us facilitate making that review process easier if anonymity is an issue for our customer base? So thinking all that through is really important. So in summary, lecture one for lesson one, you want to have a good handle on the definition of digital marketing, the evolution of digital marketing through the age and where we're headed, the macro environments in that PESTEL example that we talked about: political, economic, social, environmental, and legal, and the micro environment factors before moving on to the next lesson. And please feel free to look at and review this lecture as much as you like. I'll make my notes available to you. Although my narration may not match perfectly what I've said here, captions will also be available. And of course, be in touch if anything requires further clarification. Your textbook should be incredibly helpful, and all of the exhibits that are referenced throughout the lectures are available in your textbook with further and deeper explanation.